Hello, everybody. I don't know about you, but I've wondered about this for years. What does it mean to age wisely? We're all going to get older if we're lucky, but it doesn't mean we're going to get wise along the way. Today, my guests are Scott Fischer and Dr. Ben Green. These guys are lifelong friends who, at some point when they approached their 70th year, they decided to explore how others were experiencing aging and what it meant to age wisely. So tune into this episode because I know I have lots of questions and I am an oldster, but I want to know how to get wiser along the way. So thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dian.
So,
Thank you.
sometime around 70 years old, you decided to work on exploring the topic of aging and aging wisely. Why and what does that mean to you?
Well, I think, as you mentioned to your listeners, Ben and I have a lifelong friendship that began freshman year in college at Yale. And we'd supported each other through marriages and divorces and kids and careers. But Ben pointed out to me about 8 years ago that we'd never done anything together in terms of project. And after several months of kicking ideas around, we said, well, let's be totally self-serving. It would be good to figure out how to get old successfully. And that's really what began the process of reviewing the literature. And then we said, well, the literature is fine, but we've learned all we can. Let's go talk to some old people. And that began the process of interviewing 52 elders and trying to capitalize on the fact that Ben and I have pretty significant careers spent interviewing and listening to people. And we were two old guys without a big research budget, so what we had was time.
You introduced an interesting word that I'd like you both to opine on, aging successfully. What does that mean to you?
There's a lot of literature out there, and it gets bigger every week, it seems like. And so a lot of theories. But as Scott said, we ultimately came to feel that our intuition was what would ultimately guide us. So Scott has a long career in human relations in various corporations and also as an executive coach. And I've been a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst for 40 plus years. So we really trusted ourselves to have a sense of what constituted aging wisely. And so we came up with about 29 variables that we thought would be relevant to this process of aging wisely. But ultimately, the gold standard in our mind was our intuitive global sense about how well a person was doing. And so we really trusted that intuition. And then we did the statistical correlations of those 29 variables and how they correlated highly or poorly with the ultimate global aging wisely score.
Can you define the word wise?
Well, I think for me, it's about being realistic. As you come to any stage in life, there are going to be challenges, and the challenges involve big risks and big opportunities. And so I think all these interviews validated for me and Ben that we're encouraging people to just shift their paradigm in how they think about aging a bit and face old age with a realistic attitude of what's going to happen and an understanding of what this stage involves in terms of the physical and mental aging processes, as well as the opportunities to grow and learn during this last stage in life. And so we want people to be intentional. We want them to be forewarned and forearmed.
And Dian, Correct me if I'm wrong, but the title of your program, Silver Disobedience, really brings to mind one of our favorite researchers and her life's work. This is Becca Levy, a psychologist at Yale, and she really illuminated the importance of implicit ageism.
Mhm.
So, and of course, as a psychoanalyst, I'm always listening for implicit feelings and conflicts, guilt, impulses that a person is not aware of. So it certainly had a strong appeal for me, the idea that we all have these ideas, these attitudes toward aging.
Mhm.
And Dr. Levy has carefully examined this and found out that, for instance, if you assess people's attitude toward aging in midlife and you
Mhm.
check with them 30, 35 years later, those attitudes have tremendous impact on
Mhm.
their physical health, their mental health, the risk of dementia, uh, their uh, their sense of well-being, their happiness, their psychological uh, fitness. So that has a lot to do with wisdom. First of all, becoming more aware of your
Mhm.
unconscious, implicit attitudes toward aging, and realize you do have some choices.
It's funny, I do remember that. I have that book and I remember that research, and I've shared it a few times because there are so many people that I think we live in a society now where everyone's chasing youth in, biohacking or, you know, endless surgeries or different things. Every day there's some new diet you can try that's going to, you know, the bottom line is I think there's a lot of let's just I don't know if it's fear of age or just, I mean, it always reminds me of that Twilight Zone episode where the one person wanted to live forever. And then he really realized, I don't know if I want to live forever. This is not so great. Everyone I loved is gone. Things are, so I don't really understand that way of thinking, but it is prevalent and it's being pushed on people by advertisers all over the place.
Well, I mean, our whole society is focused now on this huge, wealthy demographic called the baby boomers.
Hmm.
And, you can't turn on the TV or go online without finding ads and commercials for wrinkle removers and strength improvers and sexuality improvers and, just about whatever you can spend your money on, there's somebody who wants to take it.
Take it. That's the key point.
We certainly hope people will consider checking out our book, but there's
Hmm.
another book that just came out recently that I'm very fond of. It's by Dr. Carrie Bernite. She's a career gerontologist, and her title of her book is Joy Span. So
Yes.
to speak to your point, there's lifespan, how many years we live. There is health span, so years of healthy, high functioning living. But I think Dr. Bernite adds a wonderful dimension to that joy span,
Hmm.
to actually enjoy your life, to feel happy, to have a sense of a purpose and meaning and connection. She has four major elements, and one of them is growth. Do you
Hmm.
continue to grow as you age? Do you feel connected to people? Are you giving to others? And do you adapt to all the changes? And she has a number of wonderful case examples of people doing that well or not so well. So all that would constitute, again, back to your
Hmm.
earlier question, wisdom in aging.
When you were doing your research, you spoke to how many people and where were some similarities and real distinct, like, wow, I hadn't heard that yet.
Well, we interviewed 52 elders who
Hmm.
ranged in age from 70 to 95.
Hmm.
And, basically, as Ben, I think, mentioned earlier, we came up with an interview protocol because we wanted to test out these 29 variables as they affected aging wisely and successfully. But our methodology was quite simple. We basically said to people, look, we're sitting here, we're sitting here without judgment, without any notion of being critical of your choices and decisions in life, would you please just share your life story with us? And for 2 hours, we let people take us on a journey. And, you know, sometimes it was inspiring and sometimes it was tragic. I think where we had a clear pattern quickly related to Ben's psychoanalytic training, and he quickly made me a junior analyst by having me read deeply about early childhood attachment issues. And
Explain that.
it was clear, well, you know, the research has been clear now for a long time that the quality and nature of our early childhood relationships with parents and caregivers are very significant as in our lives, not just during childhood, but they come back to influence us later in life when we make decisions about who to be friends with, who to get married to, who to have kids with, who to work with in our careers. And, you know, people who have what analysts call insecure attachment in childhood, and some of the people we interviewed had clearly insecure attachment for reasons that involved their caregivers or childhood trauma. They almost invariably played out those traumas later in their life with bad choices and bad decisions, bad marriages, estrangement from children, problems with alcohol and drug abuse. And
how in your interviews did you determine this impacted their ability to age wisely?
Well, you know, if I could just intervene, it was fascinating to me. In mid-career, I went back to school to become a psychoanalyst after having practiced as a psychiatrist for 15 years or so. And it was fascinating to me to learn about the history of psychoanalytic thought, which is, for most people, pretty boring. But, you know, Freud was a genius, but he focused a lot on biology, you know, on sex and aggression, which obviously are very powerful motives and explain a lot of our lives. But Erik Erikson came along, fascinating guy. He was a college dropout, but he met Anna Freud, who said, this guy is a genius. I need to make him a psychoanalyst. So he skipped college and med school and just went straight to psychoanalytic training. But he was one of the most prominent and influential psychoanalysts of the 20th century. And he focused on psychosocial development, not just psychosexual. And he even studied with anthropologists, people like Ruth Benedict and Margaret Mead. So, and on the tails of that, John Bowlby introduced attachment theory, which initially started out just focusing on kids. But I was happy to see that in the more recent literature, they've realized the same issues about attachment. That is, having someone in your life you feel like you can trust, someone who knows you, both your past, your present, and accepts you. That is so fundamentally important for our fundamental sense of safety and security, which is a foundation upon so much of what our lives are built. And George Vaillant at Harvard, who was the primary investigator for the Harvard longitudinal study of adult development, he picked having a secure attachment relationship in later life as one of the most powerful protective factors against premature aging and physical and mental illness.
You know, it's interesting you say that. My parents were married for 50 years, and then my mother had a very short second marriage, which was very sad. Her husband died less than 6 months after they got married by invasive cancer. That was terrible. And then she married a third time, which I never would have expected, when she was 80 and was married for 12 years. And I always say they each extended each other's lives.
Wow, that's a great example.
I mean, when your mom at like 85 says to me, I'm thinking about getting a different bra because Bernie says I have no seams. Which one do you recommend? Like,
Oh,
Mom, you are alive and well. I'm loving this. Let me give Bernie a big smooch next time I see him.
I wish we could have interviewed her. She would have been a character.
Pistol, the two of them,
That's great.
and there's a lot to that because you see with the blue zones, it's not just,
Yeah.
diet or where you're living, but that sense of community and belonging.
Yes. Yes.
And nothing that we've said should make people think that we believe that what happens to you in childhood is set in stone or concrete, because we interviewed people who were really inspiring, who got to midlife and looked at their lives and said, oh boy, I got to make some changes. And the ability of people to, with intention, change their life trajectory, go through a self-reflective process, whether it's through a 12-step program or a religious community or philosophy or just a social group where you do trust people and you can talk and you can think. This makes a big difference. We interviewed people who were just thrilling in their ability to change that life trajectory in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. And
what were some of the commonalities you found in people in what you would define as aging wisely?
Well, there's some fascinating research that comes to mind. Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist, talked about the growth mindset. Now, she was initially looking at kids, who had struggled with, a subject like math. Did they feel like I'm stuck, I'll never be good at it? Or did they have that's called a fixed mindset? Or do they have a growth mindset where they thought, you know what, I'm not good now, but if I keep working at it and I ask for help from my teacher and maybe do a little extra homework, I can get good at this. That kind of growth mindset is so critical for elders as well.
I agree.
Alicia Crum, also at Stanford, she makes the distinction between when you face a challenge, do you see this stress as something that's going to be debilitating, that's going to weaken you, knock you down, wear you out? Or do you see stress as enhancing and strengthening? Do you see it as a challenge that once you take it on, it's going to make you a stronger, better person? And I do think those mindsets really do play out as you move along. And again, back to Levy's work, if you have in the back of your mind an implicit positive stereotype about aging, and Scott and I were both lucky to know elders that we really looked up to and admired. Scott's father-in-law was a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather, Paul Sangri, he would come back from his doctor's physical exams every year and say he thinks I'm 20 years younger than my birth certificate would suggest. And so these guys were inspirational to us. We thought, we also can be strong and have vital, engaged, purposeful lives, even in our 70s, 80s, and maybe 90s.
I think one of the things we should all be more aware of is the notion that our world from a demographic trend standpoint is really shifting. Many more of us will live longer and healthier lifespans than ever before. It's not that people didn't live into their 90s or even into their hundreds, but now many more people, a much higher percentage of the population, will do that. And
actually, you know what? I recently interviewed an actuary, and lifespan is on the decline, and that's pre-COVID. So that started in 2020, and it's showing a steady decline.
I have read that literature, Diane, and it is distressing. And I know there's a lot of talk about deaths of despair. And I do think that's a major contribution to that decline in longevity. And
I agree with that.
And it's
I
very
think,
sad.
and I think it's very real. You talk to people, and like, I'm a big believer of stay active in whatever it is you love. Figure out whether you want to work till the day you drop, or whether you want to, make guitars or sing songs, or, volunteer at your church, whatever. Just do something. You need a sense of purpose. Purpose is so important, because when you're sitting at home and you are watching television all day long, or picking up a phone, you can't help but pick up news. And news has never been designed to cheer you up. It's designed to keep you hooked, like, oh my God, like a thriller movie, what's going to happen next? A Michael Bay movie where everything's exploding, you have no idea what alien race is going to take you over. And that despair is real in a lot of people.
We came up with 5 healthy habits that
Mhm.
we thought were essential for healthy aging, for aging wisely. And it's the acronym is GRASP. So the
Mhm.
G is gratitude. And related to gratitude, there is research that people that are optimistic and grateful, they live 7 years longer than
Mhm.
people that are pessimistic. The R is resilience. How do
Mhm.
you cope with the stresses and the losses? We've all had losses, losses of bodily functioning, losses of family and friends, losses of residence and careers. The A is active practices, just as you say,
Mhm.
staying engaged and involved physically, intellectually, socially. Uh, the else, the S is self-acceptance. So important to
Mhm.
be able to look honestly at your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, to forgive yourself and others for mistakes and hurtful decisions, but to also celebrate your successes. And the
Mhm.
final P, as you just mentioned, purpose. Again,
Mhm.
people with a high sense of purpose live 7 years longer than those with a low sense of purpose. We thought those 5 elements were really critically important for aging successfully.
Well, I don't know if this is how the math works, but if we add 7, 7, 7, 7, 7 to those 5, I guess I just added another 35 years.
All right.
or are they simultaneously? Yes.
Well, in spite of the pessimism expressed by the actuary that you just brought up,
Mhm.
one of the outgrowths for me of the Aging Wisely project has been I've gotten involved with a low-income Medicaid subsidized senior community, independent living and assisted living community. And I serve on their board. And one of the astounding statistics that that this organization's CEO came up with earlier this year was that compared with about 20 years ago, when stays in skilled nursing facilities, memory care, and nursing home stays average 7 years, that average stay now is under 6 months. So, what might that tell us? That goes to the notion of health span and joy span. We may not live quite as long, but the years we have are generally going to be healthier and more functional
Mhm.
than what they've been in the past because of medical advances. And
I'd
so
need to know a lot more. I think there's a lot that could be broken down from that statistic. It could be that someone's waiting longer to go in, they have better self-care,
they're
or
able to age in place.
they're able to age in place, or they're going in and they're hitting ultimate despair. So they're dying quicker. So I think there's too many variables. I've worked on studies for 35 years. So I'm always looking for the variables that aren't included. It's kind of like Trident chewing gum. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend it. Well, were those 4 out of 5 the dentists of the son who invented the gum? I don't know.
There you go. And I bet if we broke down that number in terms of the declining lifespan, I bet we'd see there's probably more diversity now than there was a couple decades ago. Because I bet there are also a larger fraction of the population that are getting to age 100. So I think people that are making healthy choices, and frankly, that have the resources to be able to act upon those choices, I bet their lifespan is actually getting longer. Where people that are underprivileged, I think there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of sexism, people of immigrant groups,
Well,
minority groups.
those are all valid factors, but when you speak to an actuary, I mean, it was an eye-opening experience to learn from. They don't care about any of those factors. It's men and women. That's how it's divided. They don't care about your race. They don't care about anything. When they do a actuarial lifespan table, all those other things are other studies, but the pure actuarial table that any insurance company will use is just based on men and women, period.
Right.
You know, who's alive, and it goes from 0 to 120 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they take, let's say 10,000 people. At the end of the first year, how many are left?
Yeah. Right.
At age 1, how many at age 2, how many at age 3? And that's how they span it out. So it was very interesting that it's super just dry analytics, so dry. I
Right.
was shocked.
Yeah.
But what did you find as things that someone could do, like action steps that you learned that you would say to somebody? You gave the grasp, which I love that I love a good acronym. So that's a good way to remember things. What practical things within someone's community would you recommend that you saw people doing that seemed pumped up and excited about living?
I guess my general comment to that question is that as we interviewed people, the diversity was astounding, it made
How do you mean that? The diversity of the people you chose or of the
where
opinions?
people chose to spend their time and their energy,
Huh.
and what gave them satisfaction and comfort and pleasure as they got older. For one person, it was spending time in their garden, growing things and getting their hands dirty in the soil. For another person, it was a book club. For another person, it was volunteer work. For another person, it was being the town historian in this little town they lived in. And so, I think our advice to people in general would be, you got to find your joy. I mean, our book was not designed to give people okay, do these 3 things and you'll age wisely. We're all a product of our genetics, our upbringing, and our life experiences. And so how can anybody else make those decisions for you? I'm going to tell you the 3 things you should do to live to 100 and be happy. I can't.
Just out of curiosity, when someone says to you, well, how do I find my passion or purpose? I mean, I write a blog every day. I've been writing it since November of 2016. Never missed a day. I have a humongous community, and I get asked that question every day. How would you answer it? How do you find your passion or purpose?
We did write a chapter on gratitude, and that's a good place to start. And it seems simple-minded, but maybe you're already doing this. But just journaling every day and trying to notice something in the day, 3 things that you're grateful for. They could be something trivial, like seeing a maple tree with a scarlet canopy in the fall. It could be a friend who says something nice to you, that compliments you, goes out of their way to do a favor for you. It could be an exchange you had with a barista. But to look for things to be grateful for, as trivial as that seems, it becomes kind of a background task in your mind. Throughout the day, you're looking for something to be grateful for. That's a kind of a subtle but a significant shift in the way you look at the world. So cultivating gratitude, that's so critically important. And part of that, and we talk about this in our book, is noticing yourself. What gives you joy? What gives you pleasure during the day? And don't just rush past that. Our lives are so busy to say, wait a minute, that really felt good. That was wonderful. Dasher Kupner wrote this book called Awe, A-W-E.
Mhm.
What things are amazing to you? Is it visual beauty? Is it music? Is it someone's example of moral courage? But look for things that give you that little twinge of pleasure and build on that. Say, wow, that was wonderful. How can I have more of that? How do what I need to take this part of myself very seriously and honor it. So it is a kind of a whole attitude again of growing this sense of gratitude and engagement in the world.
When you were interviewing people, were there any times during an interview or in the aftermath when you did a download where you said, "Oh, I don't see that person living a long time"? And I don't mean because of, let's say, a health issue. We're talking about a state of mind.
Absolutely. It
Mhm.
was there were, as Scott said, more often than not, we were inspired by the courage. Uh,
Mhm.
we thought about a subtitle for our book, Profiles in Courage, because there are
Mhm.
a lot of very courageous people, quietly courageous out there. John Leland wrote a wonderful book called um, Happiness is a Choice You Make. And he was following he's a New York Times reporter that followed these 6 people over age 85. And 5 of the 6 woke up happy to have another day of life over and over again. And they had very tough lives, terrible arthritic pain and losses, etc. So that was inspiring. But we did talk to a couple people that really seemed down and out. And frankly, we were amazed they had lived as long as they had.
Mhm.
Histories of alcohol abuse,
Mhm.
no one in their life. One fellow said the only significant people in his life were his psychologist, his psychiatrist, and his doctor. And what a sad life that was. And he'd had a series of losses and terrible decisions over and over again. Alcohol and substance abuse is certainly one very high risk behavior that contributed to a lot of sadness,
Mhm.
whether it was the cause or the effect of it. But that was often a part of these very sad lives.
Did you
And
want to add to that, Scott?
well, I guess I would add that I mean, this might be a good time to sort of bring in what I think is is another significant insight from our interviews and just
Great.
rolling around in this data, and that's this notion that old age, what starts maybe somewhere in the 70s, 75 to 85, uh, is really more than just sitting around exercise waiting to die.
Mhm.
And when we look at Erik Erikson and what he did in terms of identifying life stages and the challenges within each of those stages, life expectancy was maybe mid to late 60s, not significantly longer, even though it may be
Mhm.
short. So, I think this was really an insight that Ben had that as in Erikson's model, there's sort of I don't know. You can call it a dialectic, or you can say there's a tension between one end of the seesaw and the other end. And on one end, old age is about coping with loss and dealing with the fact that inevitably we all fall apart and we all lose
Mhm.
people that are important to each other, and we're all going to die, and we
Mhm.
lose connections that
Dear to us.
dear to us. So at the same time, though, if we can figure out a way to manage that loss
Mhm.
and that deterioration, then we also have an opportunity to enrich our lives with insight and growth and development, even as we get older and older. It's not a time to stop learning. It's a time to lean in. And
Yeah.
we decided that if we were going to amend Erikson's model of psychosocial development, we would add a 9th stage called elder identity revision. And
Mhm.
we tried to capture the losses that people have to deal with, and the challenges that are there for us to take on if we're willing.
That's a great point, because the losses are real. I mean, in my community, just in my blogging community, which is about 250,000, 300,000 people, I could tell you a lot of them have lost a child. They've lost a longtime spouse, and those are serious. And then, they've dealt with loss of limbs, or, different, heart problems, and different setbacks that are very real. And at the same time, I always juxtapose that. My mom lived a wild life till she was 92.
Wow.
And it was only the last 6 months that she was like, okay, this is it, I'm going out, But my closest friend, who I've been best of friends with for over 40 years, is 20 years older than me. So she's 85, and she has just finished writing her 55th book that
Wow.
she ghostwrites for people.
Wow.
So, and she's like, always like, I'm going out to this event tonight because there might be somebody who needs a good book there. And that's 85. So
always opportunities for business development,
Yeah. So it's very interesting when you talk about, that desire to get up and go and connect.
In spite of
Whatever
the
is happening.
accumulating losses that we're all going to suffer. Ben and I have joked with each other for 20 years. Ben is losing his sight to macular degeneration. I'm suffering some pretty significant hearing loss. Hearing aids help that, but they're not the answer either. And we used to just say, well, we'll sit on the porch in our rockers and
I've had those
Ben will
conversations.
see no evil and I'll hear no evil. But I think this endeavor that we call the Aging Wisely Project has really energized us.
Yeah.
And it's gotten us involved in teaching and presentations and nonprofit work. And, from my standpoint, it's been a pretty good run for 8 years. And if it goes on for another 8 years, that would be a good thing.
I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I can totally understand why you say it's invigorating. When you do something different, whatever it is, and you really immerse yourself, it's invigorating. And you're getting a great response.
And look at you, Diane. This wonderful silver disobedience. This is a heck of a project.
It's fun. I get to speak to great people. I get to write every day. I get to talk to different companies, but it's all, and you talked about the only time in my life I think I actually felt old was I woke up 3 years ago with no hearing on my right side, and I always had limited hearing on my left side. So I woke up, and all of a sudden I have 30% hearing, and hearing aids don't work. And it's like, whoa, that's a life changer. And when you talk about community, one of the first things was I didn't want to go out. And I'm somebody who said, I'm going to spend my 60s or my 70s. I'm going to be the grand dame in New York. I'm going to be throwing parties every night. I'm going to be the old lady who invites everybody to party. And I didn't want to be in the crowd anymore because the sound drove me nuts. And so it became forcing myself to go out, saying, no matter what, you're going out. Suck it up, Diane. Deal with it. And then I have a great time, even if I can't hear 90% of what people are saying to me. But I meet them and say, can we have a call later when I can talk on a phone?
Good for you. One person we found inspirational over and over again was Viktor Frankl.
Oh.
And a Holocaust
he
survivor.
Comes up a lot in these podcasts.
How about that?
He's a general theme.
His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is just such a key, iconic book. But, for him to realize that the people that survived the camps were not just trying to survive. They had to have something outside themselves to motivate them. They had to have someone that needed them to survive and help them, or they needed to make some contribution to the world. And he came up with a notion of tragic optimism. Again, back to Scott's notion about this dialectic. We all know how the story ends, but how do we sustain optimism and engagement and a wish to help people? Bernight's notion, of giving to others, such a fundamental attitude. And of course, when we give, it's in our fundamental nature. It's our hardwired in our minds and in our brains to reciprocate. Giving to others elicits them giving back to us. And all that really lights up your dopamine circuits in a way that keeps your brain moving along.
I love that.
I know that when my father-in-law was still alive, he's been gone for 5 years now, but he had one of those lives where you just marvel that somebody can keep going. He survived the camps, and while he said the only way he survived was because of blind and dumb luck, when you listen to his stories,
More than that.
you know that it was more than that.
Yeah.
He had this burning desire to find his sisters and to make sure that they were okay. And that propelled him through the war and post-war, and to then come to this country. And then he marries, the love of his life, and they have 3 kids, and she dies at 37 from untreatable leukemia. He picks up his 3 kids. He goes to Israel for 5 years because his sisters want to take care of him. He did find them. And then he came back, and he lived the rest of his life just focused on people and relationships and helping people. And everybody's got to find that purpose. And I think, Ben and I are not being Pollyanna-ish about this. Old age is tough, but every stage of life is tough. It was tough learning to walk and get yourself toilet trained, and it was tough making friends in school and dealing with peer pressure. It's hard finding the right person to marry and have kids with. Every stage is fraught with risk and opportunity, and we want people to be aware of the risk and try to prepare themselves, and at the same time take advantage of the opportunities.
Very well said.
Our basic theory was that there are tasks and tools, and the tasks basically have to do with the developmental stages of life. And Erikson's final 2 stages, something that Freud never really got into. Freud thought, once you hit adulthood, you were basically on this plateau until you fell off the far end into senescence. Erikson said, no, that there are discrete and identifiable stages even during adulthood. So intimacy versus isolation. Do you find as a life partner? And you may not stick with the same one, but are you looking for that kind of intimate relationship? Valiant added, career consolidation. But Erikson's final 2 stages were generativity, that is, investment in the world. I think Confucius talked about planting trees under whose shade you will never sit. But do you do things to benefit the world, to benefit the next generation? Of course, that's naturally taking place with kids and grandkids, but you can also do it as a teacher, as a mentor, as a lecturer, as a podcast creator, as a manager. And that kind of investment is a win-win, both for the person you give to, but also to yourself. And Erikson's final stage was basically self-integrity. Can you look over your life honestly? Can you create a life review, a life narrative that hangs together, that makes sense? Sure, there are ups and downs, things you might regret, but does it fit together in a way that feels meaningful to you? That's so critically important. We talk a lot about that in our book and encourage people to really think about creating a life narrative for themselves. There are programs like Storyworth. They will send you a prompt every week. you write about it, and at the end of the year, they pull it together in a book. Now, some people don't need that externally imposed structure, but and of course, this is what happens in a psychoanalysis. Over
Mhm.
years and years, sometimes people really go through their life over and over and over again. People say, oh, I don't need to know that. Of course, I remember my life. But if you get someone to sit down and talk about it, they'll quickly realize there are parts of their life that they have kind of skipped over. Maybe they just don't even want to think about being an adolescent, or
Mhm.
maybe a midlife period, or they're embarrassed or ashamed about certain things. But to be able to look honestly at all of it and to weave it together into a coherent autobiographical narrative, that's a very healthy and holistic thing to do, which we heartily encourage.
And I'll just add that was one of the things that differentiated our interviews with people. When we were meeting with people who had done the work, even unconsciously,
Mhm.
sort of pull their lives together, we heard a story that had a beginning and a middle and an end, and it was coherent,
Mhm.
and the narrative was relatively smooth. Um, and when that work hadn't taken place,
Mhm.
uh, people were just all over the place. And
You know, it's really an interesting point that you both just made, and I'd love your thoughts on it. It's because when I speak to people, I worked a lot with people dying in the 80s. I was in private practice. They heavy AIDS and lupus. When they were trying to figure out what was falling under acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So it was this cluster of all kinds of things. But people were dying. And then and now, when people talk to me, the ones that have the biggest fear of dying, I say, listen, you can have hell on earth. You don't need to die to find out if there's hell. So, how about we focus on what is making you feel like you could go to hell? And let's resolve it now, because then you'll feel like you're living in heaven, because that's the best way you can approach life. You've got to get through those things that are making you feel guilty or wrong or bad. And then I think you can have a pretty peaceful life at any stage. Thoughts?
That sounds like great therapy, Diane, and good for you. There's a lot of unfinished business that people are
Yeah.
walking around with, and you can try to change the subject and forget about it and repress it and dissociate from it, but that stuff is still in there and it's
Mhm.
dragging you down. And but to have the courage to turn around and face it and acknowledge it, as you were trying to help these people do, and deal with it, boy, that is such a gift to them, to challenge them to take that on.
And I think that people who really resist aging, I think a lot of it is that.
Avoidance.
What else? Let's come up with some words here, because I'm at loss, which is rare.
And
well,
it's a disavowal too of who they are,
Yeah.
dissociation. Some people say, oh yeah, this thing just kind of happened, or I don't know what I was doing. It wasn't really me that did that, but it
Yeah.
was you. And can you be honest with yourself about that? Forgive yourself and also forgive others for what they've done to you. I love the Buddhist notion that, carrying anger around towards someone is like holding hot coals,
Yeah.
looking for a chance to throw it. The person you burn most is yourself.
Right.
I would just add that I think you've hit on something, Diane, because there was something about the experience of asking people to tell us their life stories
Mhm.
that was it was exhilarating.
Yeah.
And I would encourage your audience, if you've not sat down with a parent or a grandparent or a beloved aunt or uncle and just said, look, it's just the two of us in the room. I'm not here to judge you, but I want to know your story. And just ask those open-ended probing questions
Mhm.
to help them. We actually in the appendix of our book have an outline of our interview and how someone might begin to conduct that kind of life story conversation with somebody. Um, And we had a significant number of our elders who at the end of 2 hours, in many cases, they could have gone on for another hour. It was Ben and I who were exhausted.
Mhm.
They would say, thank you guys. Nobody's ever asked me to do that before.
Yeah.
And in trying to pull together the threads of my life for you, I learned some things and had some insights in the last 2 hours that I've never had before.
I believe it.
What a gift you can give to people,
Mhm.
and a gift for yourself that they give to you.
It's such an important request that, and I tell people this all the time. If your parents are alive, sit down and talk to them, because, my father died a month after September 11th, and we were in New York at the time. Life was chaos. We had just had a great family reunion a month prior to September 11th, and then he died on October 11th. But I had a little kid, couple of years married. Life was chaotic. And I really never had time to sit down and talk to him. When my mother was dying, which I knew about 18 months before she was dying, I said, okay, I'm probably going to blow up my business, which I did, but I'm going to spend as much time with my mother as possible.
Mm.
And I was driving to New Hampshire, and staying for 5 or 6 days at a time, then coming back to New York for 2 days. Then when she was in Florida, I was flying to Florida for 6 or 7 days, then coming back for 2 days. And it was the best 18 months of my life, and I think her life. And
Wow.
when she died, I didn't cry at all.
Yeah.
When my father died, I couldn't stop crying. There were so many things I had not worked out or had wanted to know or wished I had asked or wished I understood. When my mother died, it was pure peace. And
Wow.
I know she had that same kind of peace, because I'd say, Mom, what the hell were you thinking when you did this or that? And she'd say, well, what were you thinking when you did this? It was cathartic. It's so good. I encourage everyone to have those conversations.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And as you said, what you learned about yourself in the process, and it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating.
It is so interesting. We live our lives, but I keep thinking of the metaphor during a psychotherapy session that life happens to us so fast. It's like gobbling down a huge meal, but you barely have time to digest it before the next meal comes along. So there's a lot of undigested, unformulated, unappreciated experience.
Mhm.
Carl Rogers, who was one of the founders of modern psychotherapy, he would encourage beginning therapists to more or less repeat back to the person what they had just said, which sounds stupid. But, I had someone in my med school class who thought psychiatry was just BS. So after the Carl Rogers lecture, I was saying something like, I'm really depressed and this is going on. So he thought he would play a joke on me, and so play a little Carl Rogers, and says, oh, I think you're feeling really depressed. And I suddenly felt wonderful. I felt like this guy really understood me, until I realized he was making fun of me. But
What are friends for?
Exactly. But to me, it was a great example of the fact that people don't even listen to what they're saying. And if you just repeat it back to them, sometimes they hear something in it coming from you that they did not hear coming from themselves.
Or
I
they
was just
say,
with a client.
or
They sent me this long email, and it was all about someone in their life. And I took the email and I substituted I every time he spoke about the other person, and I sent it back, because it's one of my clients that I work with only via email.
Yeah.
And all I got back was touche. Okay, I got the message.
Yeah. That's great.
But it was so funny to do. What were you going to say, Scott? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, or when you repeat back to somebody, they say, no, that wasn't what I meant at all. Well, okay,
That happens
tell me
too.
what you really meant.
My gosh.
We don't have to have the crystal ball here. We just have to be open open to listening and asking questions. So it's
Guys, I could keep talking to you for, another hour easily, just like one of your interviewees. But we're close to the end of the show. But I want a parting thought from both of you.
I would just want to emphasize that we need to approach old age with focus and intention and with goals that help us maintain purpose, which in turn feeds the gratitude and the resilience and the other factors that we found so important. So you don't have to do it all at once. You just have to start somewhere. And we encourage people to take the journey with eyes open.
One of the books that I came across was called The Gift of Years. And I love that title. To really see these additional years that Scott and I have been talking about as a gift. And John Leland's book over and over again focuses on that. Each day is a gift. It's so easy to take our lives for granted. I mean, if you think about the likelihood of being on the right planet with an atmosphere and, DNA in our brains and all the things we have available to us, it's extraordinary we're here at all. And how do you make the most of every day and not be weighed down by all the losses, all the regrets, all the guilt? How do you make the most of the gift of your life going forward?
Those were great answers. And I'm going to blow my own time frame here because I have one more question that I have to ask you both. At what point, this is a philosophical question. At what point does someone get old?
I'd like to say, the day before they die,
Oh, I like that answer.
and
I didn't expect that. I like it.
I say that because I had the experience with both my father and with my father-in-law, where the day before they each died, we had a conversation. And in some ways, I suppose with hindsight, I was giving them permission to pack it in. But they both just said, I'm sort of done. And the next day, they quietly died.
Mm-hmm.
I would wish that for we all want that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ben?
I think of that old cliche in business, grow or die. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, Continue to grow. It sounds like your mother was a great example of that until, close to the end. But what do you love? Who do you love? It's when you give up loving the world and the people around you, and you give up the hope of learning something new, satisfying a curiosity, doing something you enjoy doing, eating something that tastes great to you, that's meaningful to you. That's when you basically beginning to let go.
Well, I have to say, I think my life got extended from this episode because I loved the conversation. I love what you're both saying. I love what you're doing. So a lot of love was in this conversation, and I thank you both so very much. Really. Thank you. I'm Dian Griesel. This has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast, and my guests have been Dr. Ben Green and Scott Fischer, and they are the authors of a book on aging, The Aging Project. Correct is the title?
Aging Wisely Project.
Aging Wisely Project. Very important because we want to do it wisely. We just don't want to age. We want to do it wisely. So the Aging Wisely Project. And there will be all kinds of links so you can find them both, follow them, get their book, learn more, age wisely. And while you're doing all that, do me a favor, hit subscribe. Talk to you soon. Guys, we're moving over to the green room. Thank you so much.
Thank you.